Hey bookaholics, welcome to another video. So today I'm going to be talking about some of my favorite books that are based in the past. Now, there is one time period that I absolutely adore. Like, I just love studying this time when I was an English major, and I just love reading about it in books that are based in that time period. And that time period is like the 1700s and the 1800s. I just love that time period so much, and I do love other books that are based in the past, so I have some of the other time periods that are in this list, but majority of them are in the 1800s. So I'm just so excited to talk about these books with you guys because I just love reading ones in the past because it's just such a different culture to our own, and it's like there are different kinds of taboos and different kinds of traditions and different kinds of way of acting, and I just love reading about that. And especially in the 17 and 1800s, I just love reading it. I love watching it, and I just love seeing how the different traditions are presented to us, and I just love watching it. So I wanted to talk to you guys about my favorite ones that are based in the past. So let's just get right into that. So the first one is based way in the past. It just became one of my favorite reads this year so far, and I just absolutely love this book. But that is The Songs of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Like this, I read this like maybe a month ago, and it is just so good. It's well written, it's very just succinct, and it's easy to read, easy to get through it, and it's just incredibly heartbreaking. And it's based in... Why does someone have to come downstairs when I'm doing videos all the time? So this one is based in the old Greek traditions where they believed in God still, and it is just wonderful. And it is an LGBTQ book because the main character Patroclus falls in love with Achilles, and it is just so fascinating when I was reading this because there is a different kind of idea, same-sex relationships. Like when you're growing up, when you're like the young teens, men are kind of expected to experiment, and it's just seem as normal when they're growing up, but then once they get to that age where they have to marry and produce children, then it is seen as very taboo and very wrong. And I just found that so fascinating when someone found out that Achilles and Patroclus were still engaging in that kind of relationship. It was seen down upon because he was around that age where he was seen to be married and should be producing children, and it's just fascinating when I was reading it, and I just really enjoyed it, and I really love this. And I'm very fascinated with the classics as well, not as much as some of the English ones that are based in the 1800s, but I am very fascinated by this time period as well. And I just absolutely loved reading this, that Madeline Miller brought into the Achilles and how this world was developed, and I just really enjoyed this one, so I highly recommend it. The next one I'm going to talk about, it's based in the 1940s, and that also fascinates me because it's in the World War II, but especially this book because of how it is described. I haven't read it yet, but I have heard about how it's narrated, and I have watched the movie. I know what it's about, but I just really fascinated by the time period, and I can't wait to read it. But that one is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. This one sounds very fascinating as well because based in the 1940s during the World War II, it is narrated by death itself, and I can't wait to read this one. I feel like it's going to be so emotional and so great, and I just can't wait to read it. The next of these books was no surprise, but they're all based in the 17 and 1800s, so let's just get right into those ones. I'm so excited. So the first one is Emma by Jane Austen. This one, I really enjoyed this book. The main character, when I first read this one, was so frustrating and so annoying. The time period that this is set in is also very fascinating because women are expected to be this certain person, and they're expected to marry these certain kinds of men as well. The main character is a matchmaker, and she is pretty much convinced that Harriet, the person she kind of takes under her wing, has more status than she actually does, and tries to marry her off to a higher status male. And it's just really fascinating, and it's really good, and I just absolutely love this book as well. Like, even though the main character frustrated me, she does come out better in the end, and that is all that matters. But I would highly recommend as well because it's in the I think it's early 1800s actually, I think this is based in, and it is just so fascinating to read about how they live during this time. Like, they have these little gatherings they always have, and it's all this big deal, and you have to present yourself in a certain way, and you have to have certain qualities, you have to be in this certain mold, and it depends on your status. And it's very fascinating, and I really love reading this. Jane Austen was a feminist. In all her written work, she writes as a feminist. She writes as a feminist. Why can I say it? She writes as a feminist, and it's so good. Next one, which will come as no surprise, is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This one is also just such a great book to read in this type of time period. It is just so good. It's also very feminist, and like Mr. Darcy. I understand why some people don't like him, but I just love him. I just absolutely adore him. I really adore Elizabeth too. She is a very strong character. The 1800s was very strict on women and how they are to present themselves and how they are supposed to dress, and like the pressure they have on themselves. Like, the mother is just trying to marry off all her daughters because they're not the richest people, and they just want to make sure that their kids are taken care of. And I just really adore this book. It's my favorite classic, and I would highly recommend this one because it's just so good. Next one is based in the 1800s, and it was one I read from my Gothic English class, and that one was Dracula by Bram Stoker. This one fascinated me because of the workings of the male and female in this one. Yes, the males were seen as more superior, kind of, but the woman character in this takes a lot of credit in like getting a Dracula and like all this stuff, and it's very fascinating because the Gothic is used as a means to reveal the society's fears, and a lot of what the society faced during this time was the unknown, the other, most definitely the other, because Dracula is seen as this unknown entity that they are unable to comprehend. They don't know who he is, they don't know what he is, and he's foreign, which equals to people who are coming into England and London, kind of coming in from foreign places, and it scares the society, and that's kind of what Dracula was in this one. And it's just so fascinating, and I just really enjoyed it. A lot of the Gothic we read, it was just so fascinating. Like, Frankenstein's a Gothic, and that's all the fear of like science that was coming out, and like religion not being a huge thing, it's mostly science, and like all these other things. It was just so freaking fascinating, and I just really enjoyed my Gothic class, and I really enjoyed reading this book. And the next one I want to talk about is actually an adaptation of a book that I already talked about, and that one is Longbourn by Joe Baker. This one is based in the Pride and Prejudice world. Actually, it follows the servants of Elizabeth Bennet and all the Bennets. It is just so fascinating because it shows a different perspective of Pride and Prejudice. In Pride and Prejudice, it follows people in status. This one, it follows the servants and like how their world works during this time period, and it was just so fascinating. And I read this in my Pride and Prejudice adaptation class, and this one was the class's favorite. Like, this was people's absolute favorite. It was like the first book we read. There's certain aspects you actually don't really think about when you're reading Pride and Prejudice. Like, when women get their time of the month, it shows that. It shows like the nitty-gritty. It shows the status that is in servants as well, and it is so good. And if you are a big fan of Pride and Prejudice, or if you're just a big fan of reading about people in the 1800s, I would highly recommend this one because you don't see too much of the perspective of servants. At least I haven't read too much, so I really enjoy this book. The next one, I'm starting to get into the YAs I have that are based in this time, and the first one is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. This one was just great. It is based in the 1700s, and it's pretty much follows a guy named Monty who is in love with his best friend Percy, and they go on a big adventure together through the Europe before he is placed into his status of being taken over the family business and all that kind of stuff. And he travels with his best friend Percy and his sister, and they just go through so many different uphills and downhills, and it is so good. And Monty, he likes to drink a lot, he's very impulsive, and it takes off. It just gets crazy. It's so fascinating, like with how they interact with each other, how the world sees gay. Like, they talk about like the gayness of Percy and Monty, and like oh my god, how they take care of illnesses is just also so fascinating. One of the characters has a disease that was seen as very, very devilish. The way that they deal with that is put him in an asylum. So it's very fascinating to see how like our world has progressed, but also see in the back how they took care of that stuff during that time. And it's horrible. It is very horrible, but it's so fascinating to read about it and like see how it affected people. It was so great, and I absolutely adored this book, and I can't wait to read the second book that's coming out. The next one I like read just a couple days ago, and it was actually the inspiration for me making this video, and that one was Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Mascalco. This one is based in the 1800s during Jack the Ripper murders, and I absolutely love this book, and I just found this one so fascinating because the main character, Audrey Rose, she was very independent. She took that independence, was able to solve the mystery a little bit, and like was able to take charge and wasn't like scared to show that she was capable of being just like a man. And it was just so good, and I absolutely loved seeing the different pictures in here, and it was very fascinating. And they had some of the letters that Jack the Ripper actually wrote to people, and one of the things I absolutely found fascinating was Audrey Rose ended up going to an asylum, and like seeing how medicine and doctors took care of certain illnesses was just so fascinating. Again, just like in Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, this one was just so fascinating as well, and I just absolutely loved it. The next one I want to talk about, I just have to talk about this one, but that is The Infernal Devices by Cassandra Clare. All three books are based in the 1700s, and it was so fascinating to read about the Shadowhunters during this time period when Queen Victoria was still around and like all this different stuff, and it was so fascinating. I haven't read this book since I read it the first time, and that was a while ago, like when it first came out, and I really need to reread these ones. But I just absolutely loved reading about this time period when the Shadowhunters were around during the time that like science was coming out. Science was also developing in the Shadowhunters world, and it was just so fascinating, and it was just so great, and I just absolutely loved it. I adored this book, I adored the series, and I just have to read the series again because I don't remember much from the series anymore. I remember like the big things, but not like the details of the time period that this is based in. So I really need to reread the series again because it's just so great, and I just love this time period, so I just need to read it. That is it for this video. These are all the books I wanted to talk about. I just love the time period. It is just so fascinating to read these, and I just absolutely love it. If you guys know any more books that are based in other time periods in the past, please let me know in the comments because I just really need to read more books that are based in different time periods because I absolutely love it. But yeah, that is it. If you guys liked it, please give my video a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Check my other social media accounts on my Facebook, Twitter, Goodreads, and Instagram. I make a video every Thursday, and I'll see you guys next video. Bye!